You need to understand what it means to be the one who hears what no one else was meant to hear. Not a ghost story, not a rumor, something much quieter, much worse. The last song they played before the fire was recorded on a Sunday afternoon in October, and the woman who found the tape still cannot explain why she pressed play. Her name is Margaret Cross. She was 62 years old when she agreed to clean out the basement of the burned church. The building had stood in a small Missouri town. People were born in its pews. They were married at its altar. They were buried from its front doors. And then one night in 2019, a fire that started in the old electrical panel consumed everything but the foundation and the basement. The town had no money to rebuild, so the church sat there for 3 years, hollow and black, until a developer bought the land and gave Margaret 3 weeks to remove whatever remained. She was not a member of the congregation. She had never set foot inside the building before the fire, but she was the town's only archivist, a retired librarian who had spent her life collecting the ordinary debris of other people's lives, photographs, letters, high school yearbooks. She had a soft spot for things that no one else wanted, and the church basement was full of them. Water-damaged hymnals, a broken baptismal gown, boxes of handwritten sermons from pastors who had been dead for generations. She worked alone, mostly, carrying garbage bags up the concrete stairs into the daylight, trying to ignore the smell of wet ash and something older beneath it. On the 5th day, she found the tape. It was a standard audio cassette, the kind people use to record sermons or choir rehearsals or the voices of their children. No label, no case, just the tape itself, wedged between 2 floorboards near the old piano that had collapsed into charcoal. Margaret almost threw it away. She had found dozens of tapes already, most of them too damaged by heat or water to ever play again. But this one looked different. The plastic shell was intact. The magnetic ribbon was still wound tight. She put it in her coat pocket and forgot about it until she got home that night. Her cassette player was an old Panasonic from the 1990s, the kind with a broken door that you had to hold shut with your thumb. She sat at her kitchen table with a cup of tea and pressed play, expecting another sermon, maybe a funeral, something predictable, something safe. What she heard instead was music. It was a choir, not a large one, maybe 12 voices, counting the children. They were singing a hymn she did not recognize, something slow and minor key, the kind of song that makes you think of rain on a grave. The recording quality was poor. You could hear the hiss of the tape, the creak of wooden pews, the distant sound of a train whistle somewhere far away. But the voices were clear enough. A woman's soprano, steady and warm. A man's bass, rough at the edges. A child's voice, high and sweet, coming in just a beat too late. Margaret listened to the whole song, then she rewound the tape and listened again. There was nothing strange about it, really, just a small-town choir singing on an ordinary Sunday afternoon. But something made her pull out her notes from the church basement. She had cataloged every box she carried up the stairs, every hymn book, every photograph, and she knew with absolute certainty that there had been no recording equipment in that basement, no microphone, no tape deck, no sign that anyone had ever made a recording there at all. She called the former pastor of the church. His name was David Mears, and he had retired 2 years before the fire. He was living in a nursing home 70 miles away, and his memory was not what it used to be. But when Margaret described the tape, when she hummed a few bars of the hymn, something came alive in his voice. He asked her to mail him the cassette. She said no, she would bring it to him herself. The nursing home smelled like floor wax and boiled vegetables. David Mears was 87 years old, confined to a wheelchair, his hands curled into loose fists on his lap. But when Margaret placed the cassette player on the table beside him, he sat up straighter. He listened to the first few notes of the hymn, and then he started to cry. He told her that the recording was made on October 14, 1979. That was the day of the church's final choir practice before a planned renovation. The old organ was being replaced. The pews were being refinished. The choir wanted to capture one last performance in the building as it had always been, with its warped floorboards and its stained glass windows and its particular acoustics that made every voice sound like it was coming from somewhere holy. So they borrowed a tape recorder from the high school. They set it on the altar. They sang 4 hymns, one after another, and then they went home. The fire came 3 days later, electrical, just like the second fire in 2019. It started in the same wall, the same wiring, the same careless work done by the same electrician who had been hired to prepare the building for renovation. The choir lost nothing but time. They were not inside when the flames spread, but the tape recorder was destroyed along with most of the building, and everyone assumed the recording was gone too. They never looked for it. They never thought to look. But here is where the story changes. David Mears told Margaret that there were only 4 hymns recorded that day. He remembered them clearly. He had chosen them himself. And the song she played him, that slow minor key hymn that she could not identify, was not one of them. He had never heard it before. None of the choir members had sung it. No one in that church had ever known those words or that melody. And yet there it was, captured on tape, performed by voices he recognized as surely as he recognized his own children. He asked Margaret to play the recording again. She did, and this time, listening with him, she noticed something she had missed before. The child's voice, the one that came in just a beat too late. She had assumed it was a little girl, but now, listening closely, she realized the voice was not quite right. It was too clear, too pure. There was no breath behind it, no natural rise and fall. It was as if someone had drawn a perfect outline of a voice and filled it with light. She asked David who the child was. He shook his head. There were no children in the choir that day. There had never been children in the choir. The youngest member was 17 years old, a boy with a cracking voice who stood in the back and pretended to sing. But the voice on the tape was younger, much younger, and it was singing in a language Margaret did not recognize, something old and soft and full of sounds that did not belong in a Missouri church. She spent the next 6 months trying to identify the hymn. She contacted musicologists, linguists, church historians. No one could place the melody. No one could translate the words. But one expert, a professor of liturgical music from Notre Dame, told her something that she has never been able to forget. The structure of the song, he said, was not Christian. It was not Jewish. It was not anything he had encountered in decades of study. But the intervals between the notes, the way the melody moved from one pitch to another, were identical to a form of funerary music found only in a small region of the Caucasus Mountains, a tradition that had been extinct for over 200 years. Margaret drove back to the burned church. The basement was gone now, filled in with gravel to make way for the developer's new building, but she stood at the edge of the property and tried to remember the floorboards where she had found the tape. That spot, right there, wedged between 2 planks of old oak, and she wondered how a recording made in 1979 had ended up beneath the floor of a church built in 1887. Because those floorboards had not been lifted since the original construction. The electrician confirmed it. The renovation in 1979 never happened. The fire stopped it. And when they rebuilt, they laid new flooring on top of the old. The tape should have been sealed away forever, buried under layers of wood and time. But it wasn't.
It was sitting right on top, as if someone had placed it there the night before Margaret started her work, as if someone wanted her to find it. She still has the tape. She keeps it in a fireproof safe in her bedroom, wrapped in cloth, never played again after that day in the nursing home. Sometimes, late at night, she takes it out and holds it in her hands. She does not press play. She does not need to. The song is inside her now, the way certain songs get inside you whether you want them or not. She hears it in the silence between radio stations. She hears it in the hum of her refrigerator. She hears it in her own breathing, just before sleep. And she has started to wonder if the fire in 2019 was not an accident, if something in that church did not want to be forgotten, if the voices on that tape, the ones that should not exist, the ones that sang in a dead language from a forgotten mountain, were not trying to be heard. Maybe they were trying to be released. The new building on that land is a hardware store, fluorescent lights, concrete floors, no trace of the church that stood there for 132 years.
But Margaret knows the truth. She knows that somewhere beneath the plumbing aisle, beneath the stacked pallets of bagged fertilizer, there is a space where floorboards once creaked and a choir once sang. And if you put your ear to the ground at exactly the right moment, late at night when the store is empty and the security cameras are blind, you might hear it too. Not the fire, not the screams, just music. Just a child's voice, high and sweet, coming in just a beat too late. You will not recognize the song, no one does, but you will understand somewhere deep in your chest that you were always meant to hear it, that it was waiting for you, that it has been waiting for a very long time.